Welcome back to Artistic Revolution, where you learn about art through history and learn about history through art. In the last episode, we learned about the art period from the medieval to the Renaissance art. Today's episode will cover the transition from Romantic art to Impressionist art. How did the Romantic period break the standards of realistic art into a dramatic fantasy and beauty? And how did the revolutionary Impressionism eventually started modernism with its unfinished aspect? Well, this is what will be presented to you in this video. As always, you have additional information on the episode's topic down in the description below. The document today features a list of different artists from each time period with a brief description of their work and legacy to art. Each artist also has his name and image of one of his pieces. Stone Age production tried to take artists with different art forms and styles, so feel free to look if you're curious. You're sure to find something that interests you. In early 19th century, 200 years after Renaissance ended, came the Romantic period. Coming from neoclassical period where art was defined by simplicity and even proportions, art took a turn. After the French Revolution occurred in 1789, the idea of enlightenment spread throughout the world. Up until the end of 18th century, this philosophical and intellectual movement idolized values such as happiness, reason, liberty, and fraternity. This breakthrough in individual liberty in opposition to the absolute monarchy, which had been in place for centuries all over Europe, pushed citizens to reconsider the entire system put in place. The use of reason to battle ignorance changed Europe's view on religion, politics, and science. Coming into the 19th century, industrialization revolutionized society into the modern world we now know. Workers from the countryside began to migrate to the city where plenty job opportunities were given. Technological innovations introduced new energetic resources such as coal as well as machinery. These revolutions led to a new manufacturing system known as assembly line work, where workers were specialized in one task which they repeated over and over again. This can be pictured in Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. This satirical movie unfolds the real issue of industrialization. Employees overlabored to get recognition from this system where they were viewed as neglectable as machinery and numbers because the only purpose of the industry was to make profit. This led to a phenomenon of alienation where laborers lost sense of their identity due to their exploitation. This common feeling provoked the rise of Romanticism as a backlash. Romanticists sought to eliminate the conformist and oppressive norms which they were trapped in. Instead of promoting science and rationalization, they began to cherish subjectivity and emotion. Whereas previous eras took inspiration from classical art, the Romantic period glorified the Middle Ages. Indeed, Romantics turned to Middle Ages to criticize the consequences of industrialization. Whereas classical art was restrained to reality, Romantic art dived back into creating a fantasy. Artists expressed themselves by depicting emotion in their art to counteract the rigid and conformist society they lived in. In contradiction to classical art, where artists based themselves on real-life models, Romantic art had to come from the artist's imagination. The concept of creation from nothingness was central in this era. The ability to create original content was what made a good artist. To escape from the oppressive society that ripped them from the natural world, artists built a connection with nature. From there on, a fascination for nature's unpredictable and powerful nature grew. To Romanticists, nature was a symbol of purity and induced the primal feeling of awe which had been lost. It was believed that wilderness would reveal a man's true self rather than the city, and that rural life brought out negative emotions and morals, whereas nature induced healthy emotions. Thus, artists emphasized emotions brought out by nature's beauty. Most romantic paintings featured nature and its potential for disaster. For example, Théodore Géricault's famous The Raft of Medusa, which can be seen at the Louvre, depicts the 1816 shipwreck of the French Royal Navy boat, the Medusa, across the coast of Senegal. In this painting illustrating the event, the remaining survivors, desperately seeking for rescue, are standing over the dead bodies on the verge of slipping into the water and the rocking ocean waves. The characters in Géricault's painting are at nature's mercy. This heroic and tragic scene of death was meant to create empathy and a feeling of pity. Another major theme in Romantic art was beauty. Rather than sticking to beauty based off standards, Romantics prioritized natural beauty, which led place to subjectivity. To do so, they would try to elevate emotion through their work, and the most sought for emotion was the sublime, which is this breathtaking feeling of awe. The sublime was often created through beautiful and intensified visual drama, especially featuring landscapes, just like in Caspar David Friedrich's Wanderer Above the Sea Fog. During the 1850s came Realism. Unlike previous Romanticism, this movement took inspiration from reality of everyday life, distancing from fantasy. In this era, art sought to illustrate the raw moments of life as pleasant or as horrible as they could be. Unlike Romanticism, Realism does not include any intensified or supernatural element. Still, Realism continued to reevaluate society's values within their art. Indeed, they started portraying common individuals such as laborers and other lower class people to criticize the values of the most fortunate. Realism portrayed subjects in an unidealized reality doing ordinary tasks or activities. For example, they could be playing chess in Honoré Daumier's The Chess Players, or laboring in Gustave Courbet's The Stonebreakers, or even in Jean-François Millet's The Gleaners. They could also be reading in Corot's The Young Girl Reading. Then, during the 19th and early 20th century came Impressionism. The Industrial Revolution gave access to lower-class Parisians to travel in trains from the city to the countryside, and this benefited many, including artists such as Monet, Sisley, Renoir, and Basile. These four art students would travel to the countryside during their free time to paint the sunlight in different sceneries, and this led to what is now known as Impressionism. This new art movement mainly influenced painting and later music as well as literature. This era gets its name from the French painter Claude Monet's Impressions Soleil Levant, painted in 1872. This painting portrayed a port near the painter's hometown. After its exhibition, it caused a lot of backlash coming from the critics. The critics claimed that the painting seemed as unfinished with its blurry landscape and lack of detail. At the very beginning of the upcoming Impressionism, the traditional art community was very opposed to this new movement. The Académie des Beaux-Arts in France was founded in 1816 in Paris. The standards in this academy valued realistic art concerning history and religion, and Impressionism went in the total opposite way by favoring painting landscapes and scenes of the everyday life. Impressionists pretty much always painted outside, whereas previously artwork would be done in a studio. After several artists got rejected from art shows casted by the Academy, they started the Société Anonyme Coopérative des Artistes Peintres, Sculpteurs, Graveurs to expose their art on their own. These artists included Monet, Sisley, Renoir, and Cézanne, still famous to this day. But the critics were still very harsh on their work. The public and other artists, on the other hand, took interest in this new marginal movement. This art is known for its spontaneous aspect. It includes visible brushstrokes and unblended colors, giving it a blurred look. Looking at the paintings from a nearby perspective, it didn't look like much, but by looking at it from a distance, it suddenly takes a clearer form. The main subject of this type of art was sunlight. That's why artists preferred to paint outside in the countryside of Paris. It did not seek to be precise and detailed, but rather picture the general idea of the painting. Whereas conventional paintings at the time used dark colors to paint shadows, Impressionists layered complementary colors, giving an overall lighter and brighter painting. The modernization had its influence on Impressionism. Innovations such as photography had a significant impact on this new era of art. Indeed, cameras were able to picture sudden moments in time which couldn't be portrayed before with painting. Impressionists tried to include this idea of taking a snapshot in time by picturing brief instants in the modern everyday life. It also took major inspiration from a Japanese traditional art form called ukiyo-e. These printings influenced the flat appearance of Impressionist art, as well as its objective to eliminate excessive backgrounds in order to bring the focus on the main subject of the work. Despite its first harsh critics, Impressionism actually grew to be admired. Indeed, to this day, some of the biggest museums in the world expose various Impressionist work. The Musée d'Orsay in Paris includes many paintings of Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh, Renoir, and many more artists. People all around the world go through lengths to get the opportunity to witness its greatness. Impressionism is now considered as the starting point of modernism. Its techniques were still applied in following movements. Indeed, it inspired abstract art and, more importantly, promoted artistic freedom and empowered upcoming artists. This concludes the series of Artistic Revolution, where you learn about art through history and learn about history through art. This series started at the birth of art during the prehistoric period. Then we explored the evolution of art, going into Egyptian art, then Greco-Roman art, medieval art, and then assisted the rebirth of art during Renaissance art, to finish with Romantic and Impressionist art. We hope you enjoyed the opportunity to learn more about art history in a somewhat entertaining way, and we hope to see you again. If you haven't checked it out yet, you have additional information on the episode's topic down in the description below. The document features a list of different artists from each time period and their work. Thank you for watching and standing by us, and until next time.